Well, I don't know if the radical fairy thing is so much a movement. I've been to some gatherings. A lot of my friends, the gatherings, some friends live in this commune-like environment. I'm not so much uh, hardcore into that, but I really appreciated that that input in my life of people who uh, think that your queerness, which I define as not necessarily having to do with sexuality. You can certainly be straight and be queer. Uh, to me, it's like an understanding of the world that isn't limited by received notions of gender. It's like looking at the world through a prism of understanding the fluidity of gender and sexuality, which can manifest itself in humor and art, sort of queer sensibility, or it can also affect how you look at even the way you interact with the earth, with the world. When you understand there's a fluidity, perhaps you integrate your life more with how, perhaps interacting in a more sustainable way with the earth. Or I'm not sure how that necessarily transmits itself, but it does in the radical fairy movement, or community. And so I learned a lot from people who lived in these communes, and in the gatherings that had kind of a queer Burning Man feeling. And it's much less ageist, and though it tends to be more men, I could do with a more diverse, diversity in gender. I think the more mixed a crowd, the better the party, in terms of, because when there's too many men in one space, you get too much of that energy, of sexual energy, or kind of competitive energy. Just as perhaps too many women in a room, there's too much sameness doesn't always make a good, it's not a good recipe for balance. But I do appreciate their understanding that, you know, being different is a privilege. It's not, I don't necessarily feel a pride in being different in that way, but there's a pride in what you do with it, you know. And certainly shame can rub off from culture, and self-hatred can rub off from culture, and fear of, you know, misogyny and femininity in men, and all these things that make you not like yourself when you're young. Can't Oddly, that separateness can be a great mine of material when you're seeking to create yourself as an individual. Unfortunately, the more acceptance there is, yes, there's fewer kids killing themselves now because of the internet, and acceptance of gays in the world is a natural variation. But there's also a real embarrassing kind of conformism that comes with acceptance. Acceptance and assimilation, breeds mediocrity, and perhaps an even more sheep-like uh, conformism in terms of what kind of music you're supposed to listen to if you're gay. What are you supposed to look like? What's your body supposed to look like? How are you supposed to have sex? How are you supposed to vote? It can get very boring, and you get a lot of unexamined lives. And that's unfortunately the result of assimilation and acceptance. But it's one that has to happen if there's to be more happiness, I think. Being queer is not enough. It's not interesting enough. And there's a lot of great, beautiful people in the world, and good people, but there's fewer people there's maybe 0.01% that is actually interesting, whether they're straight or gay or whatever, because they've chosen to forge their own way, examine their life a bit more, and not settle.